One watching.
Someone's watching.
Although that could be me. So anyway, hello, whoever you are. Um, this
That's
is
brilliant. Who's watching?
um,
It's me.
now. I think we should start by saying maybe we shouldn't draw any conclusions from the fact that although we advertised this a week ago and again today,
Yeah.
we don't seem to have got too many people wanting to watch us. I'm sure that's got nothing to do with the subject matter and everything to do with not telling everybody every day that
For a month.
that we were here. So
We can
we're
broad
here to
we
talk
we
about.
can share it as a post event broad stream.
Yeah, it's gonna. Oh no, Patrick's here.
Oh, Patrick's arrived. Hello,
Hi,
Patrick.
Patrick.
We'll
There's just
wave
the
to
three
him.
of us at the moment,
I
so
can't find the picture with me, the screen with me in it. I've lost me completely, but
thank you for joining us. So we're going to chat a little bit. I think mostly about Clash of
Clash
Steel,
of Steel.
and then maybe a little bit about the latest lessons from the front. Although I suspect it's probably more of interest to obviously geeky competitive players like me, um, because it did now generate quite a lot of chat on our little Breakthrough
I
Assault.
did notice that yesterday, Rich. I did
Uh,
notice that there was
so much so, in fact, that
quite a lot of.
some people chose to
I
leave
couldn't
the chat.
I couldn't believe quite how far I had to scroll back to find the Zoom link for tonight.
Uh, Sorry about that.
That's all right. Oh, it was obviously
So, Clash of
dear to
Steel,
your hearts.
Clash of Steel,
Clash of Steel.
and I'm going to try
Excellent.
and stay positive about this because I think as some people know, I'm not always the biggest fan of sort of kind of fantasy invented realities. So it's a bit of a different approach, isn't it, for
Yes.
Battlefront?
Yeah.
So for those of you that have been unaware of changes in the Battlefront universe, they're releasing a system. It's just going to be tanks. It's set in the sort of immediate post World War II world, and it's kind of Cold War or hot war gone cold and then gone hot again. I think is the best way to put it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Sounds fair.
Um,
Fair as any.
but it's just nothing other than tanks and
Nope.
well, nothing other than armored fighting vehicles with big guns. So
Yes.
no
That's
infantry.
that's probably a better description. It's anything with a
Yeah,
big gun. Well, not necessarily anything with a big gun, because strangely the Puma is in the game, which has got a
right.
decidedly
Okay.
small pop gun compared to anything else.
Yeah, given some of the tanks that are in the game,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Pack 40
So
really isn't.
I think they're advertising it as fast flowing. If you're into tanks.
Epic is the word I've seen used a lot.
Oh, okay, right.
Epic tank battles is what we're going to fight with Clash of Steel. Epic tank
So
battles.
um, it I guess I when I say it's a bit of a departure, actually, I'm not sure it's that much of a departure because they've gone down this route of tank only games before, haven't they?
Yeah, a little bit. They've. I wouldn't say they've gone down the route of tank only games quite in the same way. They've certainly pre-trialed the mechanics of this before, I think is the fair way I'd put it. The way the game actually works has definitely they tried it a little bit with Foe with the Fog of War type cards, um, and there's quite a lot of carryover from that.
Yeah,
The basic game mechanics are Flames of War, full stop.
yeah.
But the
So I
actual
mean,
way you play the game is different.
when they the first one they did, which was a kind of ground force zero game, wasn't it? Was
Yeah,
tanks.
yeah.
Um,
We had tanks, then we had World of Tanks.
See,
Uh,
I missed out on the World of Tanks thing because I
so
don't know whether that was because I just wasn't watching.
this isn't like either of them. I don't
No,
think.
except that it's only got tanks in it.
Yeah, the only
That's the kind
similarity
of
is it's only
common
tanks.
thread
Yeah, that's
here,
the
isn't
common
it?
thread. Yeah, it's a tank only game.
So I've got a copy of Tanks kicking around. I think
Yep.
because team captains got given one at the ETC one year.
There's nothing wrong with tanks.
No, I
The difference, I suppose, between tanks and Clash of Steel, if you want to think about it that way, is tanks is a platoon level game
yeah,
at best. You don't really want to be playing with more than 4 or 5 models, and you play on a 36 by 36 square. Clash of Steel is large scale tanking on tank engagement.
Yes.
So you're looking at there are limitations on how many tanks you can actually have. I think the most you can probably get on the board is 90 or so.
Okay. That's 90 to 45 aside, sort of.
Yeah, no, 90 on one side.
Wow. Okay.
In theory, if you took absolutely everything as what we would describe as a Flames of War medium tank,
Right.
you can maybe get 90 of those on the board. If you want T-34s and nothing but T-34s. However, if you do that and your opponent puts down a super heavy
Yeah, you're gonna
post-war
struggle.
tank, you may discover you've got a bit of a problem.
Yeah, no rules for ramming.
Yeah, no, there isn't a card that allows you to ram someone. In fact, you can't actually physically engage in any kind of assault. So mechanically, it uses the Flames of War movement rules. It uses the Flames of War orders rules. It uses the Flames of War's targeting rules. There's one very interesting difference between how you determine range between Flames of War and tanks and Clash of Steel. In Clash of Steel, you just measure between the models. You ignore
Yes, anywhere on
weapon mount.
anywhere on the vehicle, isn't
Yeah,
it?
nearest point to nearest point, which is a little bit different. Simplifies matters.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're going to need to simplify if you've got
Well,
90 tanks to go through.
well, yeah, but I don't think you'll see games with that many. But theoretically, I think I worked out that was the most I could get on the board. Because actually, where the limitation is, it's not in the number of points you play; it's actually the number of platoons you put down.
Right.
Different different nations are allowed to have different number of platoons on the board in total.
Okay.
So Soviets, for
they've got
instance,
less, have they?
No, the Soviets have most.
Okay.
Because their tanks overall are the weakest.
And I suppose because we're still representing them at a higher level than the Western Allies and the Germans.
The Western Allies and the Germans have what you might describe as the superior equipment in some respects, but they don't have so much of the numbers. So the Soviets, you've got to be honest, you've got an ISU 130, which is probably their best tank in terms of its ability to kill things, but it's only got standard ISU front armor 9.
Yeah, so it's
that's going to die. That's going to pretty much die when anything sneezes at it in Clash of Steel.
It's the IS3. Have they put the IS3?
The IS3 is in there along with the T54. But the trouble with the T54, it's better than an IS2 and an IS3, but it doesn't have a much better gun overall.
No,
it's still got a 100 mil gun. Whereas if you're facing something like a Centurion with a 105 or a 20, the 105
mil gun. 20 pounder though. Is it? Do they allow the upgrade on a Centurion? Because the Centurion
there's no kind of I haven't looking through all the things. There's no kind of weapon. There's no kind of weapons upgrades.
Right.
So in that respect, it's a very the unit card is the unit card. There's one. It's got this is the profile for the vehicle, exactly the same as it is in Flow. You've got your vehicle profile, and that's it. There's no variation in that. There's no, if you take it with this option, it's 3 extra points or 1 extra point. It's all, this type of tank comes like this. It's simplified down, yeah. It's a simplified card in many respects. They've got rid of some of the special rules or wound them into the general stats. The overall, but they're essentially the same. The things that exist in the real world in other games made by Battlefront are exactly the same. Points might not be. There is a disconnection in the way they're pointed.
Yes.
Between the two between Flames of War and Clash of Steel. So that's which I think was an interesting departure overall. But the game mechanics are out and out the same. The most interesting thing in terms of the mechanics of the game, the basic mechanics, is they've rearranged the step sequence from what we currently have in Flames, where you have all of your remounts and stuff at the start of the turn. That's all. They've now got what they call an end phase, which actually gives the turn a much better shape. Actually, I quite like this about it. I think this is one of the really good things about it, and I could see it coming actually back into the Flames of War and the Team Yankee worlds, where you remount. Where you remount your bow, mounted by the cat. Yeah, you remount your vehicles at the end of the turn.
Okay.
So if it's my go, I move my vehicles, I shoot at you, I do some damage or bail you out. At the end of my turn, you get to remount.
Ah.
At which point
So
we
you
then
know whether your stuff is in
yeah
at the end of the opponent's turn in terms of
yeah
advanced planning and beginning
yeah.
to think about what I can do.
Yeah, and
you're
also
not
the way you win the game is to score points,
right.
and you
So
score
is it not
points.
objective based then, or
It
objective?
is objective, kind of. You both players score points every turn, and you score points based on your proximity to objectives, which are in fixed locations on the board. They're always fixed. There are up to 3 of them in a game, and both players score each round. So if your tank is within 4 inches of an objective, you will score points. If my tank is within 4 inches of the objective, I will score points. If I will score more points if there's none of your tanks within 4 than I would if your tanks are within 4. So it's a bit like 1 for a draw and 3 for a win type mechanic.
Yeah.
For each objective, and you score for every objective that's live, and this is where things can get interesting. But I'll come on to that in a sec. And you also score points for destroying platoons.
Right. Okay. So a bit like the Flames of War scoring system, where you get or you lose points. Actually, you don't gain points.
No, you don't gain points. You lose points. So for each and every round, you score. If you destroy a platoon in a round, you score some points for that, and they give you some really nice wheelie scorekeeping gadgets in the starter sets, which will be very useful for keeping track of the game, because you can score quite a lot of points, I reckon, in certain combinations of things. So, and at the end of the number of rounds that you're playing, and I'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics of it, how it actually plays. You play the game until either you run out of models or you run out of turns.
Okay.
There's no other way to win. You either completely wipe your opponent out, or you play to the number of prescribed turns, and the maximum number of turns is 9. I think.
So not dissimilar to Flames.
Not dissimilar to Flames. The minimum number of turns, I think, is 5.
Okay.
But the number of turns in a game can change.
And is this to do with the?
This is to do with the objectives.
Objectives, yeah.
Yeah. So you place at the start of the game, you place the number of Well, let's actually take the game. How you set the game up is probably the most important thing.
That'd be good.
So we pick a force each, right? So realistically, the minimum number of points you can play with is 50.
Right.
It's designed for a 100-point game on a 6x4 board. I think 50 points sounds very familiar. Yeah. The layout. There are 6 basic deployment maps, and you have a deck of cards. You shuffle them up, take the top card, and that determines how you where the deployment zones are, and it also determines how many and where the objective markers are placed. So you then place an objective marker on each of the prescribed points, and you place one objective mission card face down on each one. You place it face down, and you don't know what those do until they get revealed. Each player also gets some things called tactics cards,
right?
And you start with 3 of these, and these can influence what happens during the game. They can either give you re-rolls, they can stop opponents doing things, you can modify your to-hit rolls, you can and the use of those actually in the game is going to be quite critical to success.
And you get 3 for free.
You get 3. They
sound a little bit like cards in Flames of War that you buy.
Yeah,
but these come.
No. They are a bit like that, but these ones are free.
Right.
You can buy upgrade cards for your commander
Right.
as part of your force building. So you've got like an equivalent of a command card. I think there's a deck of about 20 odd of those. And I think you can use a maximum of 2 of those. There are certain combinations that do look quite effective. So there are cards that can give you rerolls to hit and give you bonuses on your to hit score, and that some of those cards affect the commander, the force leader. Others affect the force leader and other tanks within command range of him. Command range is the same as they are in foe, 6 and 8, depending on whether you've got less than 5 vehicles or more than 5 vehicles or what have you. So you've got some abilities for your force commander. You can't apply any of these to the platoons. They only apply to the force commander.
Right.
But some of the cards spill out onto other units within 6.
Okay.
Of him if they're in command range of him when he uses them. So then you've got these tactics cards, which interestingly, you get one of these every turn drawn from the deck.
You draw a random one every turn.
You take one from the deck, and you don't have to swap that for one you've already got, as best as I understand the rules, my reading of it so far. So you can accumulate these through the game. Or you can discard them and redraw from the deck. So you will always have 3 of them.
Right. So if in your turn
you decide your tactics cards are no good to you, you can throw them all away and draw 3 new ones.
So, but when you use one in the turn,
it's gone.
They give you an extra plus to hit.
It might give
you would draw from the draw deck.
You always draw 1 from the draw deck every turn.
Okay,
so in a 9-turn game, you can effectively draw 9. You will draw 9 more cards.
So you could end up with 12.
You could potentially have 12 to play in your last turn of the game. So when you choose to use these, there's probably a bit of skill and subtlety involved in here. So it's not just move your tank and shoot. There are some of these tactics cards can influence what your opponent can do as well. So you can effectively reduce their shooting range, or you can create a smoke screen so you can't be shot so easily. And all sorts of variants on, or get some extra movement, or or effectively, I think there was one, if I remember rightly, that's a bit like the Stormtrooper effect in Flames of War, which allows you an extra movement order as long as it's one you haven't used. So effectively, an Americans or British could blitz and shoot and scoot if they got that. Yeah, but these cards generally only affect your formation commander and those around him. So where he's positioned is quite important to you in the game. You don't necessarily want your force commander to be your most powerful weapon. It might be a smarter choice to place him in a slightly less powerful vehicle because you get more of those vehicles.
Yeah. And the rules are similar in terms of sort of force commander survival.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah, platoon command. your platoons have commanders, same as they do in foe. If your platoon commander gets killed, any tank within 6 becomes the platoon commander. Same with your force commander. If your force commander gets killed, he can jump to another vehicle on a 3+, the same as in foe.
Right.
One of the things that is different is, I suppose it's a little bit different, is if he changes vehicle, he doesn't take his bonuses with him. He loses any abilities you bought him beforehand. So if you've bought him some force commander upgrades, those are attached to the vehicle, not
one type of tank, and you're suddenly in a different type of tank.
We had some extra gunnery range because we got improved optics on our tank. Well, we've changed tanks. We haven't got those improved optics anymore. They don't carry with you. It's just the fact that you're still alive, which is quite important because obviously it does all the things that force commanders do in ordinary games.
Yeah, and I mean the mechanism. So there's interestingly, I think when it got trailed, and it's fair to say it has been the subject of quite a lot of debate amongst those of us that write and present for Breakthrough. That I think there was more interest in the sort of new mechanics than perhaps in the models and the
I suspect so. And the mechanics of the game, I would say what they've done with the turn sequence.
Yeah,
ignoring the fact that there's no there's no assault step. Basically what they've done is they've taken what you'd call step one in the current game, where you've got all the motivational and
and moved it to the
ambush.
end of the opponent's game.
But they've split it in half. So step one in Clash of Steel is reveal your ambushers and bring in your reserves, because there's still reserves potentially in the game, and that's actually determined by the mission cards that you draw. That's right. So we've chosen a random setup, and now we've chosen a random mission. So I think there's 54 different potential scenarios in the game. You can play 6 and 9. So there's 54 scenarios overall. So there's lots of, you've got to play quite a lot of games to get two that are the same in theory.
Yeah,
there's plenty of there's a real lot of scope in there without having to do a lot of legwork. That's quite neat. I quite like that. But it works well because there's the only thing they've got rid of is there's no deep reserves. You can still be delayed. You can still be scattered.
I was going to say that might
be delayed. You can be scattered, but you won't be in deep reserves.
Big heavy tanks
for obvious reasons.
So, where's your army?
What have I got? I've got one tank and you've got one. Yeah.
I might win that one.
Yeah. And your reserves come on you get reserves every turn.
Okay.
Which is so it's not long before your vehicles are on the board, depending on the structure of your force. You can obviously, just like in foe, it's a 60-40 split. Right. You can tune your force to minimize the number of reserve units you get.
Yeah.
40 points. You can burn up 40 points on a couple of large tanks that you put in reserve, or you can have umpteen. Or you can have four platoons of Nashorns in reserve. Well, actually, you can't have 4 platoons of Nashorns because you're only allowed 2 of them. But you can the point. You could stick 4 platoons of T-34s in reserve. 40 T-34s in reserve if you want to. You can have 10.
The objective mechanism.
Yeah.
So I remember. It might have been before you even came on board on the blog. I wrote up. Mark and I played a game, and it was at Mark's old house, so it is quite a long time ago. We played the Fog of War cards when they came out, and I wrote it up. I remember writing it up as a first person, so like I was writing as if I was the British commander. And I think I remember there was some people were quite interested in those.
Yeah.
And then obviously because I don't play Flames unless I'm playing in a competition, because there's not very much of a community around me.
That's what you get.
I've never seen them again.
Your castle. Oddly enough, I don't actually have a set of those.
Mark had them, and
I never bought a set.
They were, from my sort of tournament perspective, they were like, they're not going to run in a tournament.
No,
but it was for a beer and pretzels game, and I drove down to Mark's, and it was good fun, and it was a nice write. I enjoyed writing it up actually, and it's another thing
I think it could be quite a good narrative game actually, and I don't necessarily think that the way the missions in it work would translate unreasonably into the main game.
So that's where I was going to go next. So the Fog of War thing, it did, we managed to get. In fact, it was one of the things I said I would do again, and I've never got around to it. Thousands of things that I say I will do again for the blog, and I never get around to doing.
Don't we all do that?
But it did lend itself to that sort of narrative description.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a narrative game than a standard foe game.
But I do wonder how much. So I need to sort of say as a disclaimer, we don't know what's coming next. We know a little bit in advance.
Yeah,
we get a little bit more information than the big releases. But we're not part of the design team or anything. But you kind of wonder whether, as Team Yankee was a little bit, new game came out back end of version 3. Team Yankee came in with all the movement orders and the different morale stuff, and then that formed the base of mid-war and version 4 of mid-war. You kind of, my thought process is, okay, how much of what's being introduced here? Because I don't want to fall out with anybody at Battlefront. It's probably not for me, because if I'm going to fight Centurions, I'd rather fight them against something, a little bit later. But the mechanisms is what I'm quite interested in.
Yeah, and the mechanisms that they've got in this, I think the changes to the turn sequence, I actually think that's better. Personally, I like the. In reality, it doesn't actually make any difference, but actually, just the positioning of them feels a bit more. It makes the game appear a little bit more reactive. I do something, you do something. Rather than I do something, I do everything else, I do some more stuff, and then it's your go.
And
it doesn't change. It doesn't change the fact that it is a I go you go game. It still plays like that, but actually,
there's a bit more
as the opponent in a turn, yeah, I can't move my vehicles, I can't shoot back this in your turn, but there is a little bit more for me to do other than make saving throws.
Yeah,
and I think it will, because it's quite interesting. You still get your recovered bailed out vehicles recover before you bring in any ambushers or before you roll for reserves. It doesn't change the overall balance of the turn, but it does mentally change it. It changes the perception of it, which I quite like. When I saw the way they'd done this and split it out, I thought, well, actually, it makes no difference in overall terms. But the way it looks,
just feels better.
It just feels better. Yeah,
and sometimes
it had a good feel
the
to
way
it. I liked that.
It is.
It's a feel.
I think the criticism that I hear a lot. So the big game around me at my local club is the historic game. I don't play very much fantasy at all. Is bolt action.
Yeah,
and I play Bolton. I won't say that it's the greatest game that I've ever played, but I think what attracts people in is that it isn't you go, I go, you go, I go, you go, I go.
It's I do something, you react. I do something, you react.
Oh bugger, I go again. So
yeah.
And I think that definitely feels that for new people coming into the hobby, that's a big thing.
Appealing. That's quite appealing.
I mean, I'm beginning to sound like my dad now because I'm nearly 60. But for those of us that have spent years playing I go you go games, because that's what
we always played. When we have to play a game where that isn't what happens, is we get horribly confused.
I tell you, I mean, that's not the reason I don't. I think bolt action has some faults. Actually, the drawing dice thing's actually quite a good way of keeping things different. But I think that might be a thing that if you brought it into Flames of War helps make. I don't want to do the accessibility thing to death like we did a little bit yesterday chatting on Facebook, but. So what about? So that's good. That's a change, which isn't going to.
So I think is a.
What about the missions?
The missions.
You think that would transfer across?
Do I think the missions thing would translate across? I don't see that it wouldn't. Is my honest answer. What it does do, particularly given the ways that Battlefront have been talking about altering the missions pack, and I appreciate they haven't yet published any of the updates to the missions pack, Phil, and I appreciate it's not Phil that has the decision on that. We've seen here in the UK two sets of updated missions since the last missions pack was released to the world. In September, we played at the UK Nationals with an update.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. And there was another one that came into the UK in early March this year for a tournament. And the way they have been modifying the missions info, particularly the attack missions, by pushing the objectives out of the deployment zones and into making the defender move. I can see now. I've seen Clash of Steel. I can see where that idea germinated, because in Clash of Steel, you never play. The objectives are always in the middle of no man's land. both players
Yes, because there's
have
not
to
a
move.
natural defender in an
No,
autumn
there's
game,
no
is
no.
there?
They're out and out, and I don't see that that's a bad thing in foe, and it might encourage a slightly more dynamic style of play. Even if you're going to play with infantry, there's no reason
So
why
do you
you have
not
to sit
think it
still.
potentially discriminates against an infantry army?
No, I don't, because I play infantry armies all the time. So
Okay.
and I don't sit there. I'm not interested in playing Sitzkrieg. I don't play like that. I don't see why anybody else should think you need to play like that. Not being funny. Both the event. Well, in fact, all three of the events I've won in the last 3 years, they've all been won with infantry armies.
Okay. Cool.
And I haven't played defend once in 15 games.
No, I think there's this tendency
there's
with
this
some people to
that's
pick
just
an infantry army and then defend with it.
and that's not what you want to do.
I took Paris to
I was going to say you had your Paris out.
Iceland and attacked more times than
why not?
I defended.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, except of course that
sometimes it goes wrong.
Bulge British Barrows don't get night attack.
No, which is a bit unfortunate.
The one British infantry list that doesn't get so one or two British infantry lists that don't get night attack.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But overall, I think I could see that you could translate it into foe. You could bring it into the main game. I don't think it would make things. It would be like you'd get rid of the mission matrix completely. Yeah. You don't need it would effectively the way the game works. It's a meeting engagement. All the scenarios are a meeting engagement using the meeting engagement rule we know from foe. So whoever's going first
counts as moving.
In Clash of Steel counts as moving, even if you don't. You need to move, so you want to get on the objectives because you want to find out what they do. Some will score you extra points if you hold them. Some will actually shorten the game. Some will only be valid. Won't come into. You can capture an objective and flip over the card to find out what it is, and suddenly discover it doesn't go live till turn 5. Or you could ignore moving to an objective and suddenly discover when you turn it over, it stopped being an objective at turn 4. And therefore you have wasted your time. So there's a bit of there's a bit of jeopardy in it without
okay. Yeah.
So there's a bit of the unknown about the objective, and the fact that you've got up to you'll have 2 or 3 depending on which way around the game's being played. Basically, if you're playing in a wide, 6x4 wide, you'll play with 3 objectives. If you're playing on a 4x6 long, you'll play with 2, because obviously generally because you've got further to move to reach them.
So yeah, which, I mean, I didn't see. I mean,
because they're always the objectives are always in the middle of the board.
So for a beer and pretzels game, I couldn't see anything wrong with the Fog of War cards. I think for obviously being more of a tournament player, I could see that it was a bit too random for.
Fog of War was definitely much more in the random event. Yeah, suddenly the objectives in the bottom left-hand corner of the table, and everybody's got to rush over there. These are fixed. These aren't moving. Right. They are at a fixed point. They're going to be between 12 and 18 inches away from your deployment zone.
So controversial question then, I guess. Do you feel? I mean, I again, as I say, I'm not wanting to fall out with anybody from Battlefront. I'm wanting to be positive, and look, it's
the game. I think the game is.
I think you and I agree that we need to move.
We need to move forward.
You need to look at how you make the game inclusive, and we might not entirely agree on how you would do that, but if all we do is just keep it for middle-aged white blokes, it'll just die out.
I was going to say, we're all getting older, Rich.
Some of us faster than others.
Well, you and I are at the older end of the break for assault spectrum.
We are.
We've got a good 10 years on everybody else at least.
Yeah,
if not more than that.
I noticed that when I go to competitions, and I've realised that most of the people I'm playing with, I'm actually old enough to be their dad.
Well, the scary thing is most of the people I play are younger than my kids.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, I don't have kids, so is the issue for me would be, I've always been uncomfortable with sets of rules that try to move you away from effectively being able to play in a historic way. So putting the objectives in the middle and going, you've got a dash for the objectives. Do you feel it's kind of enforcing a style of play that Battlefront want to enforce to make the game more popular? Not saying that that's an intrinsically bad thing in in a way of making the game inclusive. But for me, that would probably be an issue because
Well,
as a historian, I want to kind of play historically.
I kind of look at it a bit like this, right? So if I was playing a medieval pike and shot type game, well, generally, we're going to move towards the middle of the board. We're going to clash, and you're going to try and outflank me with your cavalry. I'm going to try and push you with my center. And in a way, actually, Clash of Steel to me feels much more of that type of setup. It encourages you to move and to move your troops. I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. It creates a more dynamic style of play, which, personally speaking, I don't think that's a bad thing. Overall, I think anything that encourages people to think, you've got to think a lot more. You can't just sit there, right? If you just sit there and shoot, you can't just sit there and shoot at me. You've got to do something else. You can't win the game. Well, you can win the game by sitting there and shooting at me, but you might discover that killing all my platoons isn't worth as many points as I've scored by holding the objectives. Because an objective's worth 5 per turn. So if I hold that for 9 turns,
45 points on
I've got to get 45 points by killing platoons, you've got to kill 15 platoons because they're only worth 3.
And there's 3 objectives, so that's 45 times 3.
Yeah, potentially 45 times 3 that I've got.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've got 135 points plus anything I've killed of yours.
Yeah.
And you at most, if you just sit there and shoot at me, well, I can work out what you can score.
Yeah, really easy. Well, yeah. I mean,
I've got 6. If I rock up with 6 platoons, I know the most you can get off me is 18 points if you don't capture any objectives.
Indeed, right? And that's going to form part of army design and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah, choosing how you construct because the obvious thing to do is go, I'm just going to have as many of the really big things as possible. Right? There are limitations on what you can have, so you can't have, you've got to have a bit of a spread of stuff. So you can't just have all the big things. You can't just have all the dross. You have to have some of the other stuff. You have to have a bit of a mix. But similarly, if I've only got 3 platoons or 4 platoons, I'm probably going to lose.
Yeah,
because I just can't get enough points, and the game goes on. Even if even if you've only got your force commander left and you're hiding behind a hill so he doesn't get killed, and you lose the game automatically. But I'm still scoring points every turn that game's in play, and the game does not stop.
No.
The only way the game stops is when we get to the end of the turns,
rolling in,
or I kill that. So I'm just going to, even if I've lost a load of stuff at the start of the game, I can continue to accumulate scoring points, even with a relatively weak force. So there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more to it.
And do you think it's scalable up to include the other elements that are not currently in it? So
So
if you stick artillery and infantry in it, is it will the mechanisms become bogged down or become unworkable, or is it
I don't think so. I tell you what will be interesting to try once we've actually got a set of it to play with.
Yeah, because
one of the things we haven't got is that I haven't got the game. I've got the cards. I've got the PDF documents. I think Lee has got a box on the way to him to have a look at. But it'll be one of the interesting things I think to try will be to see actually if we use the Clash of Steel mechanic and we insert the missing step, which is the assault step, into the game. It's obvious where it goes. We put the assault step in after the shooting step, same as we do now.
Yeah. We
put that step back in and we play a game and see how the game actually plays. Can you play it with those? I think the biggest challenge isn't the artillery and the infantry. I think air is the slightly more tricky thing in the game. But at the end of the day, air's an unpredictable beast at the best of times. I'm not sure how you'd cope with air because technically
you could. I mean, if you wanted to go down that route, you could actually abstract air out.
Yeah, you can abstract it out. Yeah,
you can abstract it out without having to need the models actually. In many ways,
or just say actually we're not going to worry about it.
It could be a card.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
it
it
could
could be a
equally.
it could be a card.
Yeah, it could be all sorts of things.
There's
But
a couple of we
yeah,
have
go
been
on.
joined by some people, so
Oh, that's nice. So we got
great, and
some
thanks
quick
for
questions.
interacting. Harry was commenting on some of the newer. I'm assuming, Harry, that the comments are relating to the Flames of War, new Flames of War missions.
Do I need to look at the chat?
And I think that you're not alone in having some concerns about the defender issue, particularly given that there seems to be a lot of people defending with half tracks. And particularly my current bugbear is the endless number of SDKFZ 251
And 250s,
21s. Is it
yeah.
21, the one with the 15
The triple,
millimeter on
the triple,
aircraft
the triple,
where
the 20,
everybody seems
and
to
the
find a
nines.
whole cause worth of them
Yeah.
to put on the table.
I
So do
was
think
actually
that
looking
is
at the
something that
numbers of
Battlefront,
those that were actually
I do
built, and
think
the
that
number
is
of them
something
built
Battlefront
was
would
actually
probably
quite
look at.
small.
Well, they made
Triples.
254.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is not very many triples.
No.
I suspect there are certain players out there who have probably got all of enough. I'm have to replicate them
Well,
one to one.
I have a sneaking suspicion that when I go to the ETC in Poland in August,
You'll probably see more than
there will
254.
be more. A bit like when there were more L6s when we went to
than were ever made.
There'll be more 25121s
Yeah,
than were actually built in the room.
without a doubt.
So going, and I was saying, I think the defend thing, I think is something that Battlefront are probably going to look at.
Yeah.
The new game then, because I think what we'll do is
the new game is attack.
Yeah. Well,
it's all about attacking.
I think some of the I think it's because the ability to pick which stance you've got in Flames of War.
Yeah.
Which you couldn't do in version 3, right? Because it was very set. Unless
it was
you
set,
had
it was set to whatever you chose.
So if you had infantry, you were defending. You know,
if you had mechanized troops,
you attacked infantry. But of course, now you've got the situation where
mechanized will always defend. Well, it seems German mechanized,
or indeed tanks. You've got people with tank armies that are defending.
It's even worse.
Sherman's defending. So I think that is something that's perhaps look, it happens. People who play in tournaments always look. We seek to break the rules to find the competitive advantage, and then you play the competitive advantage, right? That's competitive wargaming. That's why some people don't like it.
That's right, and that eventually has an end point in all editions of a game, right?
Yes.
You and I both have been playing more than long enough to know full well it doesn't matter what game you play. If you play it in a competitive environment, there comes an end point at which ultimately you pretty much synthesize out, if I take this is going to be pretty much the outcome. And you reach that point.
And Flames of War has actually had a pretty good run in terms of being a major competition set.
It's done very well. We've been playing
over 20 years.
I was going to say that it's been around 20. I've been playing, so I've been playing Flow for 17 years now. 2007 was when I bought my first models.
I'm probably around the same time.
When I stopped playing certain other games.
I still played them. I still kept playing them as long as I can, and then unfortunately, everybody that plays DBM lives in the southwest, and I don't live in the southwest anymore.
I was going to say you don't live in the south.
It's a bloody long drive.
It's a long way from where you are now.
I don't play. I
actually moved, which is partly what induced. I moved from the east to the south, which is partly what induced my change of gaming habits. Because I needed to find a game that I liked that people who live near me played.
So that's how I ended up playing Flames of War, because I was a big DBM player, and I moved to the Midlands, and DBM in the Midlands had kind of gone through that stage.
It gone through. Yeah,
I've had enough now, and I never liked the successor games to that, and then I fell into Flames. And I said, I'm going to buy one army. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm way past that particular promise that I made to myself.
One army. Have you ever bought just one army for a game that you've played more than once?
One room full of armies, I think.
I was going to say, my house is like that. We have a room full.
I've kind of stuck with it, and I had my little blip between V3 and V4. But I guess the next question is, so I think you and I
don't see Clash of Steel itself as a game that you will play
I wonder if it's a gateway game, right? So
I
you and
view it. I don't know whether I wouldn't use the word gateway game, but I certainly see it as a bridge.
yeah, okay,
So I see it as a bridge between World of Tanks at one end, small scale using my fantasy tanks and my late production things, because it doesn't really matter in the way that game works. If you've got a mouse, that's all well and good, but I'm going to have my Sherman and I'm going to give it all these extra upgrades to make it really
yeah,
groovy,
yeah,
so I can kill you. That's we can play a game in 20 minutes, half an hour at one end of the spectrum. Then at the other end of the spectrum, I've got something I've got to invest more time and energy into, particularly if I want to, I want to collect out a nice rounded Flames of War army, or a nation. I want some infantry, I want some artillery, I want some tanks. I want a bit more of to move towards the more historical bent of the hobby. It kind of sits in the middle. It uses the mechanics of one. It uses some of the aspects of the other with the upgrade kind of cards that you can apply to your force commander. So they've pulled a little bit of that back down. They've pushed basically foe up. They've taken out what Phil might say and Wayne might suggest are the bits of the game that slow it down, which is the assault step. It's obviously the slowest part of the game. It's the most complex. It's a little simpler.
I think I described it as Flames of War light.
It's a little bit like that. I don't see it. I would suggest if we were playing maneuver versus maneuver in Flames of War with a
Yeah,
tank company each, that's what we're playing.
yeah,
The only difference is that we aren't choosing how long the game is. We aren't choosing where the objectives are placed, because that's
and we
fixed.
don't know what the object. We don't know
And we
what the
don't know what the
value.
objectives will do.
Yeah, what the value of those
Those
objectives will
objectives
be.
are,
Yeah, okay.
because they may turn out to be worth nothing, or they may turn out to not be worth anything until a certain point in time, which, if you think about a real world battlefield, sometimes that is true. Something, there are instances where the importance of something on a battlefield can suddenly become greater.
Yeah.
Waterloo's a good example of that. The Hay Saint, right? Strategically, it was pointless to attack it, but it became the whole focus of a battle.
Yeah.
Until such time as it suddenly wasn't, and the battle moved away to be and the focus was completely in a different area of the battlefield. And Clash of Steel has that potential feel to it, that the focus of the battle itself can shift. What's important in the battle can suddenly change. Well, it won't suddenly change, but it can change.
But it can change.
And it can change.
The target
can
audience.
Move. I think that the target audience is the younger gamer, without shadow of doubt.
I was going to say, do you think it's a deliberate attempt? Because you identified how many players of World of Tanks there are out there, and here I'm one. I don't tend to play with the fantasy stuff. I do tend to keep going
something real,
trying to find the real thing. Although they keep giving me free stuff that never existed.
Free up, 500 free upgrades that you just didn't want.
Free stuff's really important being from Yorkshire, right? I can't give it up. So I do occasionally have to. I've got one with teddy bears stuck all over it that they gave me on Valentine's Day, I think.
Yeah, they did some funny. They did some fun things.
So do you think it's a deliberate attempt at trying to encourage, that type of gamer into physical, touch it, put it on a table gaming?
Yeah, because I think there's some element of that in it. I don't want to be disingenuous around all of what I think is behind Clash of Steel. I think there are some other aspects to Battlefront's business that Clash of Steel potentially fulfills a need for. And I think the one thing it does do, which I think is much better than what they did in Mid-War, is it keeps the what ifs out of the main game.
That is really, really important for me.
Which, if you don't want to alienate your core buyer of that game, which is going to be an older gamer generally, right? Flames of War is expensive. However you look at it, right? It's not a cheap game to get into. You're going to spend a considerable sum of money, even if you buy a starter set, because a starter set is never going to be enough for you.
No, they don't work particularly well, do they?
No, very few of them are particularly
good. Longer-term armies.
No, they're great for a start, but they are exactly what they say. They are a starter army. So it comes kind of in a price point between the two games again,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It uses components of both games that they've already got. They've got the models from one
Yeah.
and from the other and bought them into a mechanic that they've bought up. They've gone, maybe they've gone, which bits of the mechanic do we really like? There's no kind of, the exception of the range measurement. I didn't spot anything else that I thought was radically different to how it works in Foe. There are a few things that get the names changed. So there's no gone to ground in Clash of Steel.
Oh, I know it's called
It's
something
called
else.
camouflage.
Camouflage. That's
Camouflage.
Right. Well, because how do you go to ground in a tank, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've got the camouflage rule, but it's gone to ground in Flames of War. And there's another one in there as well that they've just changed the name of. But they work all the things that are in there. They work exactly the same. So slow firing or stabilizers, they all work the same way. There's no underlying change to the mechanics of the game from Flames of War. There's a bit of tweaking of the names. So if you know how to play Flames of War, it's going to take you 2 minutes to work out how to play Clash of Steel mechanically, in terms of how things operate and what terms mean. There might be a few changes of terminology, but you'll recognize it instantly. So it's not going to alienate anybody who wants to give it a go. And it creates that kind of game in the middle. You call it faux. You can call it faux light. I don't know whether it's got. I don't know whether it's got the diversity of list construction so much. The list construction is a little bit more constrained.
Right.
Well,
you've only got you've got
to
be a tank.
Well, you've got to be a tank. You've got to take.
You've got four nations. You've got Brits, Germans.
There are four. The four big four.
Yeah.
Post-war. So you've got the Germans, the British, the Soviets, and the Americans. They all play slightly different.
And that's not unlike Flames of War.
Not unlike Flames of War. The Americans are a jack of all trades. The British are very specialized. The Soviets are a bit underwhelming, but numerous. And the Germans, lots of high-tech kit, but there's not a lot of it. Small but very, very effective. I think there are. The Soviets' best. The British firepower have their best firepower is 3+, right?
Yeah.
British have a standard firepower 3+, whereas the other nations have a 2+ or even an auto firepower rating if they hit you with a big enough. If you get hit by big enough gun,
if you get hit by a big enough shell,
you're dead.
Even if it doesn't go through, it's going to blow so much off you that
it's going to shake you to bits anyway and do you in that way. So there's a lot. You've got that same kind of trait and feel that you have in Foe with them. You don't have all the little minor powers, but whether they bother to put them in, I don't think so. I think the game will stay around the core elements. I don't see it. They'll bring what you might get come into the game is some more of the post-war
tanks game. Presumably there'll be a bleed across with the models from that
with the heavier.
There's a
to a point,
if they're going to tool up to make a model, you're going to have to be able to sell it into a number of markets.
You want to sell it across both your markets. So and to me, it sits in that nice space. It gives them a product which I like. That I have to say, when people see the books and the booklets, the graphics in it are great.
Yeah, no, I thought the production was really nice.
The production of the stuff is fabulous. I really like the look of it. It takes everything that they learn in the Flames of War rule books and how to lay the rules out, and just takes it one step slightly further forward, and it's much clearer and cleaner. It's really obvious, how does a rule work
I thought that when I had a quick glance through, and I looked mostly at the lists and stuff, but I thought
is the one bit I haven't actually really looked at, oddly enough, because to me the thing I was interested in about Clash of Steel was the mechanism.
I'm just an old style, straight to the list. What do I do?
Well, because
we
must be about done because I need to go for dinner.
Yeah, me too. So pizza's on. So look, I think hopefully, and we'll post this up, and people can dip in and out. We've
certain,
been,
it's certain.
we've been, go on, mate.
I certainly think it's worth a look. For if you play Flames of War, there's nothing in it to dislike.
And you can, so just so we can, just so as we make
Yeah,
clear to people,
yeah.
you don't actually have to buy any new stuff
No.
except
Well,
the rules to be
you will.
able to play the game, do you? You can use Comets and you can use
Yeah,
Panthers and you can
yeah.
use T-34s.
And if you
You
play
don't have
team,
to buy
and if you
the
play
sexy
team,
new
and
stuff,
if you
right?
play Team Yankee as well, you'll even have some of the other stuff.
Yeah, so, yeah. So
If you've got
Centurions and things like that.
T55s,
Yeah, yeah. I've got quite a few of those.
and you've
Yeah,
got Centurions, and
yeah. So
um,
it's not, it's not necessarily a demandingly expensive new trip
no,
into the world. You can probably get in
the
there
only thing
quite
you will
cheap
have to buy, you will have to buy a starter set
because that'll have the
because
bits
that's
and
the
pieces of
only
it.
way to get the card decks at the moment.
Right.
There's no release schedule for the
And
card
what
decks and stuff
do we
separately.
know? Have we been given a price point, or is that
Yes, it's
still
60.
confidential?
If you're in the UK,
Yeah.
it's £60 RRP.
Right.
If you're in the US, it's $75.
And the starter set has some
There's
of the
there are
World of
two.
Tanks type
So the
tanks in, doesn't
yeah,
it?
you get a little bit of everything.
So the British one's got the turtle, or
It's
is it the
got so the
tortoise?
British one
Tortoise.
comes with the tortoise,
That's it. The
and it
tortoise.
comes with some Centurions, and I think they're Comets. The rest of the tanks in it.
Okay.
So you get like a platoon. You get a platoon of real tanks,
Yeah.
basically. You get
Well, Centurions are real tanks.
well, yeah. I was going to say you get a platoon of World War II tanks.
Yeah.
They might be. You get a platoon of just post World War II tanks,
Real
real
post-war.
tanks,
And
and
then
you
the
get
what if
one
tanks.
or two what ifs.
Cool. All right.
So and the starter sets are 245. They're 45 points of vehicles per side. So
Right.
in the starter sets, plus all the card decks, the counters, all the usual things that Battlefront put in a starter army box. You get the rules and the rest of it. But it's not bad. It's not a huge investment. You can play a 50-point game, which is about the minimum. If you've got some Flames of War tanks already,
Yeah, you can add them in.
you just chuck them straight in. If you've got your Tigers, you've got some Panthers, you've got some Comets, some Centurions.
Yeah.
You've got some more easy eights. You've got some Pershings or some IS2s or ISUs. I could see it being a game where I could actually get to use all of my ISUs and IS2s. Quite exciting, really. I could get all of them get 40 of them on the board. It's pretty cool.
So marks out of 10, Martin.
I think I've got a subtle feeling it's going to be actually quite a good game. I like the look of it. I like the feel for it. So I'm going to give it a good. I don't know whether it's not a 10 out of 10 because it's not got enough in it for that. But certainly it's a good 8 or 9. I think it's a good product. I think they've actually got something that could be quite attractive to quite a wide range of players, from people who want to play just and there are plenty of people who want to play with tanks.
Yeah.
They've taken away the need for you to bother to have to paint infantry or have to collect gun teams. We can just play with our tanks. Great.
So I think for me,
there's nothing to dislike.
It's not going to be for everybody, I guess.
No.
Probably, if I'm being honest, probably won't. I wouldn't turn my nose up at it. Probably won't go out and buy a set. But I think that the important thing is the point you made a little bit a while ago, which is that it's not intruding onto a core product in the way that other changes did. Mid-war monsters and things like that.
I think
that's really important about they've learned that lesson about maintaining a core base from the V3 V4 change, which did cause some ructions. So it's good, and I think as I say, I've looked at the PDFs and stuff, and the production values and the descriptions are good, and hopefully there's enough in there that they can take through into whatever comes next.
I think there's aspects of this
that innovate and keep people interested in playing.
I think there's aspects of this that definitely have got mileage in the core game. There are aspects of it that maybe haven't, and there are aspects that shouldn't be in the core game. I'm like you. I don't like those in the core game. But I think doing it this way, I think they've given themselves the best opportunity to produce a variation on a theme. Not, they haven't really, other than producing some new books, some new little pamphlets to go in the starter sets and some card decks, this hasn't really created a huge amount of stress on the design studio, I don't think.
All the production,
or the production team, because it's using things they've already got. They're not having to create new models. All the models you could ever want for this game, they've already got. The molds for.
Yeah.
It gives you something to do with those other things that you might have bought because they look cool and you think that looks great, but I don't really want to put it in my game. And now I've got something to do with it without aggravating whoever I've
without aggravating
anybody else.
Grumpy old historical gamers.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah,
right.
Rich,
on
cool.
that note,
take care.
Have a good weekend, mate. And thanks
you.
to everybody for joining us.
See you later.
Watching us later. Ping any questions that you might have onto the Facebook page or pop them up on the blog. And I think Lee's going to do some written stuff around the product, isn't he, when it comes out?
He's trying hard.
So,
he's trying hard. I was talking to him last night, and we've got some stuff coming on it. As soon as we've got a box, there'll be a video and whatever. We'll do one of his unboxing videos and stuff.
That'd be cool.
So there'll be a bit more coming, and we'll